to hear about some funeral industry drama. Okay, so last week, a week ago today, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, had a workshop where they asked both industry representatives and consumer advocates to talk about a new proposed ruling they have to what's known as the funeral rule, and is the one regulation in the funeral space, and it basically says that you are allowed to receive a price list whenever you go to a funeral home, and you don't have to pay an extra fee, for example, if you bring in an outside casket, and a number of other things. So they're evaluating whether or not they should be requiring funeral homes to post their prices online, which in 2023 I think would be a great requirement. There is a number of industry experts who are, or funeral representatives, who are saying like, oh, you shouldn't have to regulate this. The funeral homes are going to do it themselves. But that is just not the case. They did a report back in 2022 saying that only 40% of funeral homes are actually posting their prices online. And for the ones that do, a lot of them are hiding them in very hard to find places. This is Chris Farmer, and he's the general counsel for the National Funeral Directors Association.
Consumers don't shop for funerals by prices. The data shows that, statistics show that, and I don't think that there's any harm to consumers for not posting prices online. And I think that that would be the harm to small business would be outweigh any benefit.
Okay, so what data is Chris Farmer referring to? He's referring to this report, which was conducted by the National Funeral Directors Association themselves. And what they found was they did a survey asking people how often they compared prices for funeral homes, and then they also asked them how often they're doing it online. And what they found was only 1.6% of funeral consumers are looking for prices for funeral goods and services online. However, this begs the question, why would they be looking for it online if the funeral homes don't post the prices online? They're not going to find anything. So the real question to ask here is, if you could find prices online, would you shop for them online? And a report commissioned by the Consumer Federation of America found that 75% of people would shop online if they could find those prices online. The National Home Funeral Alliance also did a survey in which we found that 53% of people said that if they had to plan a funeral this month, cost would be a significant factor, whereas only 4% said that cost would not be a factor at all.
It's a trap for regulatory enforcement. If you're looking at a $48,000 violation because you didn't know that your crematory changed their pricing, I mean, that doesn't seem fair, and I don't think it's going to help consumers.
So when he's saying it's a trap, he's saying, well, what if the crematory changes their fee? So basically the way it works is when you go and you look at a price list at a funeral home, you're going to see a line item that says direct cremation, but that doesn't necessarily include the actual cost of the cremation itself from the crematory. It is just what the funeral home is charging you to help them with the direct cremation. So oftentimes people might come to the point where they receive a bill and they're like, what is this extra charge? Because it wasn't on the general price list. And so what's funny is that he's saying like, yeah, like it's a trap, and it's a trap for everyone. It's a trap that, the consumers are having to deal with as well. And it's exactly why it would be so helpful for us to have price transparency on all fronts, including the crematories and the funeral homes and the cemeteries, because that helps the other people in the industry to know that they're charging people correctly, and it helps the consumers, obviously. And so this is why it would be super helpful to have prices posted online, because then the prices are up to date very easily. So everything we've been talking about, this is level 1 consumer advocacy, if not level 0, because this is not even getting into the number of Americans. There's millions of Americans in funeral debt today, and this is just talking about showing people the price. Okay, so if you went to the GoFundMe page for Philadelphia, for example, during the height of the pandemic, you would have seen more than half of those GoFundMe pages were for funerals. So don't tell me that funeral consumers do not shop based on price. If you want to do something about this issue, I highly encourage you to go to the link in my bio on Instagram and click on my link tree and submit a public comment. It's going to be the very first link on there, in support of funeral consumers' rights, which is everyone. We are all funeral consumers. And then this guy, Tony, was completely ripping on the consumer advocates on this funeral blog. Tony says, if a tenth of the suggestions Whitty and Knight had for improving the GPL are accepted, the document will be about 45 pages long. We are talking one page, Tony. One page. Here's the page. I would, frankly, love it if we had 45 pages of consumer rights for funeral consumers. Okay, I'm going to leave you with one last positive comment from the workshop last week. That was by Beverly from the People's Memorial Association, which is the one co op funeral home in the country. And she's responding to these comments from the funeral directors earlier in the workshop where they were saying, well, it's just impossible for us to post our prices online because, they're just too complicated. We have to explain all of these things to our clients in person.
To me, it kind of feels like funeral homes telling on themselves. If your GPL is confusing, write a better GPL. Um, PMA has a member owned funeral home, and that GPL is crystal clear. It's not hard to include a little bit of explanation about what a service is. It's not hard to explain what an outer burial container is. That's the point of the GPL, is to do that education. And I'm sure that Sarah has probably experienced this a lot because we both do a lot of community death care education. But if we were to ever produce educational materials that left people with that many questions about what we meant, that were designed to make every person that read them call us for clarification, that would be an indication we were really bad at our jobs.